Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Pla.
Greetings, PowerShellers. It's another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Pla, at Andrew Pla Tech. And we're getting weird. It's a new year. We got Matthew Gill. Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast. You've been on here before, I think, on a bar session. You are an SRE coming out of Louisiana. How you doing, man?
Correct. I am doing very well. I've never been on a bar session, actually.
What? I could have sworn
we were gonna do a bar session. We were gonna do a bar session, and then you just had a line of people, and maybe I also had too much of the bar, so it didn't happen. It gets the best of us. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing extremely well, man. We've been planning this for a while, and I'm glad we could do it because we've been actually meeting pretty regularly. We're both. Is it organizers? I don't know. We're both helping put together PowerShell Summit this year in Bellevue, early April. And so we've been kind of keeping in touch there. You have been really at work because it's been like CFP time, wrapped up. We've finished all the selections of speakers and all that's kind of finalized. How's the schedule? We got that done too as well.
Schedule's doing great. Greg Onstadt and I are the co-directors of content. And we are the people behind the curtain trying to figure out like what sessions are going to make it. And we've got a great team of evaluators that also help us out from the community. So yeah, we've got, stats, over 50 speakers. That's including all the VIP and Microsoft and whatever speakers. So 50 unique speakers, 60 plus sessions. That's including after darks and side sessions and things like that. It's going to be an excellent summit in 2026. And that's, April 13th through the 16th. So
I'm excited for that. PowerShellSummit.org. Check it out. Because I know one of the speakers there, I'm very close with him. I love his work. Just, I really see things the same way as him. And
almost
he's
exactly
actually
the same way.
Almost exactly the same way. His voice sounds different in my head, but Andrew Pla, aka me, is going to be doing a live podcast. So if you're a fan, longtime listener, please join us in person if you can. If not, it's kind of be square kind of thing. You can always listen every week, but looking forward to meeting people and having like a consistent way of like, hey, you're a PowerShell listener. Here's where we're going to collate, because sometimes I found people are like, they don't always come up. I would like come up to somebody and they'd say, hey, I actually do know you. I was like, hey, why didn't you say hi? And then we end up being like great friends. So looking forward to that being a little bit more formal and established.
Can I derail this already? Do you know why your voice sounds differently in your head than when you hear it?
I do.
Oh, okay.
I think it's just the way it vibrates, right? Because it's like
your bones are vibrating, and
way more. Yeah. I'm so used to it.
Your voice, and you're like, I sound nasally or I sound higher pitched. Yeah. It's just because your head's vibrating when you're talking.
And honestly, the truth is, everybody's voice that I hear is pretty much reasonably acceptable. I don't really think like, oh, well, maybe occasionally, but so I tend to, even if it sounds weird to me, probably.
That sounds like the goal for a relationship. You're like, you're reasonably acceptable. This is okay.
Yeah. Good enough, not enough to feel bad about it. That's kind of like, I said that before. It's like my height, I'm not short enough to feel bad about it because I wasn't. Yeah. Let's proceed into the first topic, which is what the heck is an SRE?
SRE.
It's one of the things that it's like one of the newer terms that came out for maybe an old thing, but what is an SRE in your opinion?
Yeah. So good question. I get that a lot because they're like, oh, site reliability engineering. Cool. And I was like, yeah, I reliably engineer the site. And, I kind of just play around with it. Google coined that term a while back. It got popularity in 2016 or so. So it is still relatively new. And it's effectively software development principles applied to operations and infrastructure, right? So we look at the processes, we look at the infrastructure, we look at like how things are being done in an enterprise or an organization. And we say, hey, look, automation, observability, planning, risk management, like apply those types of development principles and cadences to things that are already existing. So like reliability of planning, reliability via planning is something I'm big about, because the first thing people want to do is grab a keyboard and start hacking away at keys. And that's cool if you know what you're about to do. But if you have to solve problems while you're coding or while you're developing the solution, then you really started wrong. I used to teach at a university, and the first thing my students wanted to do was pick up a keyboard and start writing code before they even understood what they were writing code to solve. So it's like problem recognition, proper planning, solve everything on a napkin. in a notepad document. Like have a requirements document or a sort of at least a high level outline or something. It's okay if you have to look up a reference or figure out how you're going to do something. But if you know something's technically possible, you gotta fill that out first.
It sounds like it's kind of just like high level approaches to site reliability, meaning uptime. Like you're kind of coming at it with the perspective that I see a lot of people come to after doing PowerShell for a long time, where you're solving problems at the root, right? Not, coming up with great little add-ons once things break, but you're thinking proactively.
That's it. So proactivity is the big benefit there. And you get that via proper planning. But it isn't just high level. I mean, I write PowerShell, usually PowerShell or orchestration code, whether that's PowerShell or JavaScript or some type of integration in a platform, akin to Ansible or ServiceNow or some type of orchestration platform. Every day.
High level perspective, as in you see the big picture. You don't get lost in the small problem. You can see the kind of bigger system it plays into.
Exactly. Yeah. It's I like to describe it as everything is a puzzle and you have to break things down into puzzle pieces. And sometimes the puzzle pieces are things you buy. Sometimes the puzzle pieces are things you build. And sometimes the puzzle pieces are just reconfigurations of what's already out there, right? So solving the puzzle the best way possible. And you do that, you're not scared of development. You're not scared of like taking a chance on some newer technology or open source technology or whatever. That's more, I guess, personal and local to my enterprise. But so you were right. The measurability of things is really important because one of the great things with site reliability engineering is how do you sort of like, what's the conversation around reliability? What means reliable versus unreliable? And we use SLAs, which site service level agreements, effectively like expectation contracts. What is the expected level of service here? You see this a lot of times when like cloud providers, this amount of uptime over this amount of time. And then you get like SLOs, service level objectives, which are the measurable targets that they're trying to hit, like the what's actually going to be a thing and how good is it going to be. Service level indicators, that's the thing you are actually measuring, the actual like technical component. And this could be uptime or pingability or response time or status code, something like that, thinking about APIs. And the idea is that you have to balance reliability versus agility, right? So like if you can define reliability, agility is just making changes. We're just changing a bunch of stuff. We're pushing pipelines. Great things can increase agility while maintaining reliability, right? Like testing, automation, certainly, just make things consistent. So it's this sort of, it's your mind wrapping around the total concepts of everything needs to be measurable. You need to set expectations appropriately. You need to determine when your expected level of service is getting when the current level of service is getting really close to breaching that low end of expectation and back off the changes so your reliability meter can sort of like refill,
Right.
Yeah, smart. It's just reliability economy at that point.
Right. Yeah. You're not just responding, you're responding in a thoughtful way at times.
Yes.
I got a question though. In this work, you told me beforehand, you're using PSFramework, which is an amazing framework by Fred. There's tons of podcasts, tons of content on it. It is probably the most extensive framework module, and it's like the most expensive module that I know of in PowerShell because there's like so many kind of sub modules within it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, it's one of those things where I look at it and I go, I've written worse versions of a lot of what this does, and I'm happy I don't have to anymore.
Absolutely. And one criticism I hear though is it does too much. It's too big of a dependency. Okay, we're not going to take it on. I hear that sometimes. I personally have taken it on in the past, and I've also not taken it on different projects. You have chosen to. Whenever I was doing it, it was kind of like an organizational decision to take advantage of this. It's kind of like it can be a choice sometimes because you have to kind of take a dependency. Can you explain kind of where you're coming from and what you decided?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. So at my enterprise, there are very few infrastructure and operations employees that automate, that write code, substantial code. And I say substantial, there are not many people out there writing modules. There are not many people out there writing long-term enduring solutions that way. that people would use in their own scripting, in their own coding journey or automation journey or PowerShell journey, right? So a lot of the code we operationalize gets called and executed via orchestration, right? So whether that's Ansible or Tower or ServiceNow or whatever these orchestration platforms are, it's might call PowerShell that someone else wrote, but we've abstracted out. We don't have any standards necessarily. Certainly, things need to be secure. You can't do weird stuff. You've got to be above board on that. But we require like a standard out, like a payload back or whatever that we can sort of standardize on. But as far as the actual code that people are writing, generally speaking, you're not getting a lot of people writing modules. So when they look at, I need to log this to a file, like it was a requirement of the code that they're writing, that's probably a function. If we're lucky, sometimes it says, write -log to file. They don't even use, they may even be writing an ISC still. They may not even be using VS Code. It depends, right? Because maybe they didn't install PowerShell, PWSH. Maybe they're still using Windows PowerShell. So, we had a couple of them recently with the invoke web request thing recently. That's kind of, that bit us yesterday for the first time. I didn't think it was going to get us, and it got us.
So let's describe that. What's that invoke web request thing? Because I think people should hear about it.
So recently there was a CVE, I forget the number, but a CVE was posted where you could execute script execution of remote code via invoke web request. So it was in a Windows update, I think on December 9th, if I remember right. If you install updates past that and you're using invoke web request without the use basic parsing parameter, if I remember right, it's going to drop into an interactive mode. So you're gonna have to say, yes, I want to do this, or no, I don't want to do this. And if you're trying to run Windows PowerShell, or I guess PowerShell in non-interactive mode for automation purposes, it's going to break, and it's going to give you back console, garbage. Depending on what platforms you're using, if it's just like gobbling up that, it's not gonna be able to parse that, and you're gonna have an error. You're gonna have to go in and patch that.
Oh, interesting. This sounds like almost a time when great logging that's actually configured for what works best for your environment, that maybe you're checking whatever logging system you're using kind of meets you there. Maybe it could work well with that. Is that something PSFramework does at all? Or
it actually is something that PSFramework is. Fantastic segue and tie-in. Wow. That's one of the first things that we adopted it for with modules that we've been writing at work. And Kenneth Neal, shout out to Kenny Neal, because I didn't know about PSFramework. Kenny is a recovering database administrator, and he was rewriting a module that I had started. Then he took over, and we did together, and then he took over fully. And it was for Vault checkout for credentials, sensitive credentials, and different things in a separate platform, so that we can bring it into PowerShell. And I had written a logging function separate from that, and it did what we needed to do. And I understand a lot more about how logging can work as a result of doing it myself. I understand a whole lot more after looking at PSFramework and Fred's work. I think you have a bunch of PowerShell Wednesday episodes with Fred, yep. And I think you have a couple on PSFramework, because it's to your previous point, it is massive. As far as answering your question, right? So logging, configuration handling, it does a lot more. It does. You can look up the docs. It's got, for days, it's got tab expansion and a bunch of stuff. We don't use every fundamental component of it, and you don't either. You don't have to, right? I would say if you were just using it for configuration handling, if you were just using it for logging, if you're just using it to mess with parameters or deal with parameters, it's worth it. If you're just not in a vault and you can have dependency modules, it's certainly worth it, because you're going to reinvent the wheel, and it's not going to be as good. It might be tailor made for what your enterprise or what your specific use case is for, but it's not gonna. Fred's put in so much work on this.
Dude, I would say straight up, I'll challenge you. Nobody can write it better. You can't. And if you could, I'll probably want to have you on here. He's just, and it's so many years of it too.
He's thought of it, and it's when there's a good ideas are where you find them. And I like to say that, you don't have to do everything from scratch for it to be the best idea ever. If it's a good idea, and Fred has heard about it, he has built it in. He has found a way to build it in, if it makes sense. It's not like he's lording framework over anybody. Super approachable guy. Very funny story, tangent a little bit. We were using PSFramework at work, and I had gone to, I believe it was Summit 2024. And Fred was there. That was the last one he was at, because he wasn't at 25. And I was there, and I was going to demonstrate something, and I was gold plating what I was going to showcase a little bit. I was trying to like bring on framework into a custom little thing I was doing. And I was mentioning to him that we use PSFramework, and he goes, "Oh," and he straightened up and he smiled, and it's like he adjusted a tie he wasn't wearing, because he's always wearing like a t-shirt. He was like, "Oh, really?" And just a dignified like, "Thank you very much." And I thought to myself, I'm like, what a weird reaction from this random guy. I totally didn't recognize like his name tag. I didn't recognize him. I was still like figuring out how the community worked. And then later I'm talking with Kenny, because that was one Kenny wasn't at. He wasn't at that summit. And I said, "Oh no, I think I'm actually next to the author of the framework of the module that we're using." And he goes, "Oh, tell him hi." And so I had to tell Fred that story. I'm like, "I didn't recognize you. I'm so sorry." Yeah.
Fred is
super
so
approachable
awesome.
though. And yeah,
Oh,
framework's a fantastic module. It's one of my top modules, mainly just because like it does so much. It cuts. There's certainly, I think, a learning curve a little bit to implementing it well.
You should know
But one
PowerShell well before you try and adopt it, I'd say.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, at
And
least,
look at it. Look at
typing
the module.
commands
Look at how
well
it
and
does
stuff.
things. Like, I think I've learned more by picking apart these modules, right? And just looking at like, well, why did you make that decision? And then there's documentation to support a lot of it. It'll answer your questions.
Yeah, and just also a couple credits to Fred and to this module. He is, I don't remember the term, but he's basically a consultant for Microsoft for large customers of different types. I don't know exactly which ones, but he's testing these modules. They are tried and true in best practice situations in many different orgs. It's not just one guy with a little lab system that he's having fun with. I mean, I'm sure he has a lab system, but these are modules that are getting ran all across the world in many different orgs. And check out Fred's GitHub activity from the past year and give him a shout out, because seriously, he's put in the work and he's so passionate about these tools. It's really cool. And I think a lot of people have something to learn from the way that he has built tools that serve the community and serve his customers or employers or whatever it is, because there is an approach that you can take, and depending on your company, they may not, but there is an approach you can take where it helps everyone. It builds you up, it builds them up, and hopefully makes the modules even healthier over the long term, because you can incorporate more feedback, aka more security. That's what we think, right?
Yeah.
We incorporate, you tell us what's insecure, we make it better.
I think that's the mindset a lot of enterprises might have, is that you onboard some open source. Oh, you just downloaded something from GitHub or from the gallery or whatever. Yeah, but I mean the eyes on this thing are just massive, and if there were issues, you would see them. So it's like, do a little bit of research, sure, like due diligence, absolutely. But you don't have to worry about this module. The fact that it integrates it right, it outputs logging to, gosh, it does like Splunk. It does so many integration type logging. It's really, really great. So if you have like a centralized, like a SIM or some type of logging solution that is centralized, likely you can just use this and it'll integrate very well. I don't know if you've ever like had to deal with like logging from, I don't know, vCenter or Windows event log, logging. Like getting some type of like universal like system to look at it is really annoying sometimes, or expensive. Annoying or expensive. This doesn't need to be annoying. This just works. So if you're building custom solutions for your enterprise, you'd want to look at PSFramework. Absolutely.
And I would say, even if you're just looking to level up in your career, if you were to implement all of these in a lab environment and kind of understand the why behind all of it, your perspective is going to be, I'm proud of you. You're going to be proud of yourself. You're going to see things in a whole different light, in my opinion, because it will give you an insight into a lot of best practice things, a lot of security oriented things that maybe your organization doesn't have, and maybe you can learn from and borrow. And if you were to borrow a lot of these things, you're going to jump way up.
Yeah, your personal journey is going to elevate, and you'll level up at work too. I mean, that's the great thing. Not to shy away from his other modules, though. He's got quite a lot of other modules. I know there's Framework NuGet, and then something that I've heard about it. I need to look at it, because we were talking kind of before the show about developing modules. There's PS module development that he's working on, and that's something that I always like. I think the very first, my foray into module development was everything's going to be manual. Then I found Plaster, but Plaster was kind of abandoned a while back. And it's like, I think someone else has taken it over relatively recently. But then, yeah, PS module development. So, it's one of those things where maybe PSFramework is big and everything. There's other stuff adjacent. There's collateral benefit, to go in and looking at these modules, not just for that module, but everything from that author as well. So.
Yep. And there's just going to be a difference in your career. If you're into this PowerShell stuff, you're still listening to this episode, you really want to be connecting with the people who are sort of at the top of the game with the sort of industry accepted modules, learning from them when you can, even if you're not adopting all these modules, but you start doing this for long enough, you see these patterns and they don't feel foreign to you. At least for me, that's what it was. The first time I looked at a GitHub project, and maybe other people out there are going to be like it, I saw so many files that looked insane. .git ignore, .git attributes, readme.md, who the MD, WMD, what is this? It's just like over my head. But you do it enough and you just like you said, you create that first module and you decode some of it. You figure out a lot of this stuff you don't even have to look at. And your brain goes to where it needs to go.
Yeah, I think there's
module development suite.
There's the mimicry, right? You mimic someone, or you mimic the top people. Don't mimic somebody that's doing it wrong. Look at people that are successful and shadow them a little bit online, virtually, or whatever, and figure out what they're doing and how they got there. Because nobody starts at the top. They put in the work, and you have to put in the work too. And I don't think people, good, hardworking, like high work ethic people, never really stop working. They always shift. They might shift away from technology or shift towards something else, but they're always putting in that work. Figure out what made them where they're at, what got them where they're at, and just do that. I know we talk about imposter syndrome a lot in this community in technology. You're being on the journey, even if you're not there's no end to it. You're always walking the journey, right? So just keep walking, look at the people. Don't feel bad if you don't know something. Ask questions, especially the PowerShell community, but I've seen other technical communities too. But the PowerShell community is incredibly embracing of questions of people that want to learn. So you're not going to get any pushback. You might get a joke here and there, but it's way easier to learn something the right way than to have to unlearn something that was wrong and learn it the right way. So ask questions.
Do you know who one of my first mentors was in the PowerShell community?
Who?
Jumped on calls with me.
Who?
Fred was.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
Yep. I actually talked about a contribution I made to his project that he sort of helped me through a little bit, helped me come up with an idea. I gave that as a lightning demo at my first PowerShell Summit. I think I was still an on-ramper because I was like, you got the opportunity to go to Summit. I was taking it so serious. I did everything I could. And Fred was so willing to jump on, show me how to use hotkeys, how to move around my editor without using my mouse. I had no senior scripting person who had been coding around me in my org who was ever going to mentor me. So to have that was a total game changer. And Fred, his approach to sharing things informs me in the way that I want to pay it forward, but also in the content I do now. Like I try and show people behind the scenes of coding because it can feel like magic, but behind the scenes, it's just one step at a time. And Fred has put in a lot of time, so he's really good at it. And you can get really good too if you can put in the time, like you were saying. And I think part of that for me is I try and make the time I put in fun. Makes it a lot easier to put in more time if you're enjoying it. Sharing the wins with friends.
Yeah, it's so a big point that you bring up there is the granularization of problems, right? Like breaking problems down into achievable components. I forget the exact quote, but it was, something like, when Neil Armstrong asked, was it hard going to the moon or whatever? He answered, someone was like, no, I just made breakfast or something. I forget the exact quote. Maybe it was Buzz Aldrin, but effectively it was, no, I started my day with eggs. And then we got in a rocket that had a bunch of screws that were tightened just the right way. And, a bunch of metal that was bent just the right shape and a bunch of fuel that was mixed just the right amount. And all of these things by themselves, as you sort of traverse the tree down all the way to the super children, those are all individual things. Turn the screw to a torque. Problems look big because you're looking at the big problem. But the big problem isn't just one thing. It's a million small, consumable, chewable things. Don't get overwhelmed by the problem. Take the time to break it down. Spend the time to work the problem.
Yep. And that's what we see is people put in the time. They find a community. Finding community is so important to not losing that putting in the time, because you can have a hard day, you can feel rejected, and if you're not tapping in with other people, that imposter syndrome can start to really creep up. And I know that I fell victim to that early on in my kind of journey with IT and stuff. And as soon as I found community and found other people, complete game changer for me. And it's a lot of the reason why I love community so much now, is because I see the impact it had on me, and it still has that impact on people. So if you're out there and you don't have this kind of group around you that's like support, you should just get one. You should just do it. Step out there.
I've seen people quit their jobs, leave good relationships behind, right? Because they felt siloed, they felt islanded from connected, all the connection that they could have had. And yeah, I'm happy to say that my personal work from home journey, remote work journey hasn't significantly disconnected me from my peer group at work. And right around the time people or things were starting to ramp back up where you could go outside again, Summit came back, and I was able to go to Summit, and I was able to experience that community, the PowerShell community. And I've made some really great friends and peers, technical peers, and I would say technical peers in terms of they know way more about PowerShell than I do, but it's not like they're lording that over you or whatever, like a senior or a lead over a junior or a standard sysadmin or whatever. It's a great community, and as long as you have that connective tissue where you can text somebody on a weekend and show them a funny meme or a funny picture, or ask them about some code, or just ask them about things that aren't being PowerShell related. Maybe you guys like barbecue and you want to know, hey, how do you make it less acidic? Do you use less vinegar? Do you use vinegar at all? What about sous vide? Have you ever thought of sous vide in that thing? Those are great questions to ask a community, and you'll find that as long as you've got that, you've got everything.
Absolutely. And just in the world we live in, there's a lot of lonely people. I think double-digit percent adults claim they don't have a single close friend. So you're not going to be, if you're in that boat, you're not the only one in that boat. If you put yourself out there, there's going to be more connection than less. And man, it is just so much more fun. And I think that I tell people this because I really want to reiterate, when you ask, to teach someone something is the best way to learn it. So whenever you're asking someone something, you are genuinely offering up a gift. Hey, whoever wants to learn this better, offer me your knowledge. And so you're kind of giving them an opportunity to share something that they've probably spent a lot of time thinking about, that has probably been really helpful to them, and they'd love to pay it forward. The passion that Fred has poured into this, he's loving to pay it forward. There's so many people in this community who love paying it forward, love sharing the good vibes, and seeing that awesome light bulb moment in other people with PowerShell. Because those wins that you can have with PowerShell, dude, it's just serotonin for me. There's just so much boom, 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 stuff fireworks in my brain.
It is. There's been a few moments at work. I can't talk about it specifically, but there are a couple moments at work where there's an opportunity for people that normally, they're more like ClickOps type people, right? Where they're going to lose their ability to ClickOps their way through a UI, and they are going to have to go to a more of a scripted, I would say strategic and deliberate, intentional approach. They have to solve the problem before they type in a command. They have to do discovery. They have to investigate. And it's not just go to a UI and click a button and read some text, and then it's made to be used. It's not tools. It's a product, right? And whenever you reduce that down to the tools and the capabilities, instead of just a delivered product, you increase the complexity of it. You increase the learning curve of it, but you also increase the ability for that person to solve that problem in the best way, in the most, I would say, beneficial way to the enterprise or the organization. And there are so many adjacent benefits that are going to come with that. A lot of people don't understand basic logic, or conditional logic. A lot of people don't understand about structuring sort of data. And I know this is a PowerShell podcast, right? But a lot of people don't understand getting data in and processing data and exporting data. It's they copy and paste their way around, or they use a module that does it for them, which is fine. But I mean, solving the problem when you don't have a UI or a web UI to go through, it does make you better. If you put in the work, it absolutely makes you better. So yeah.
It demystifies all of it. You can just poke it. You can understand, oh, these are protocols. There's things here and there. If you know the command to do something, it's not magic anymore. You don't need to be like on the TV. They show the things with the characters and the 16. It's not like that.
I showed someone right click, show definition or whatever in VS Code.
Mm-hmm.
and they got to see all the code, like the explosion of code. And they were like, oh, it's just doing that. I was like, yeah, it's just doing that. All of a sudden, it's just the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. That's it. So yeah, I love seeing showing people that it's okay. It's okay to ask questions, and we're going to get you there. I mentioned that I used to teach at a university, and I taught object-oriented development. So OOP principles and freshman and sophomore level courses. Eventually, I got up to like junior and senior level courses as well for systems administration and a few other things. Largely Linux related, systems administration. But the common thread was in teaching something that I already knew, I got feedback and I got questions and I got this sort of, there was a conversation around it now. It wasn't just an echo chamber where it was me writing slides, recording videos, presenting material, and then crickets. It was a light bulb goes off over there, and a light bulb, a popcorn light bulb. People start asking questions. And at some point, I got questions I didn't know the answer to, which means I got to go answer that question. I'm in a position where it's okay if I don't know, but we're going to find out. Let's go ahead and do that. And we'd derail the whole class. We would go and investigate this and figure that out and just, throw science at the wall, see what's stuck. And I got better by doing that. I got better by teaching, or I got better at learning by teaching. So I 100% echo that statement. It's a great feeling to be there.
And something that I really enjoy doing in those situations where someone reaches out, they want me to help them with something or mentor them with something, I like pushing it back on them as well and saying, hey, yeah, I'm happy to. Can you offer me, maybe it's feedback on what it's like to learn the pipeline or, whatever we're going to talk about, or maybe if they have some experience in something, seeing if I can, but just because a lot of times these situations where it's like, I'm asking you a question, it can be so much more of an equal thing. It doesn't need to be this mentor mentee, like, yeah, I might know PowerShell more than you, but you may know this more than me, or you may have a really interesting perspective on this tooling that could lead me in a whole different direction that has nothing to do with PowerShell. Or you're super new in your career and you have that valuable perspective. Because anyone who's wise, who's got that galaxy brain of been doing this for a while, they understand that the next generation is incredibly important. Yeah. Understanding where they are, how we can make tooling more accessible. For someone like you, who's been in IT, who has all these tools and stuff like that, wouldn't it be terrible if you had no one else coming in who had any of these skills or who was able to get upskilled? Like, we need to have a consistent flow of people who can develop these tools. I like to remind people of one thing real quick. It is a big brain decision to decide to write PowerShell and code things. And that is the first decision you should make. But after you've been doing that for a while, you realize that the real galaxy brain, the thing that you should really do to have an impact is empower other people to write the PowerShell. And you can still write the PowerShell, but like you can do it in a way that lifts up others. And then you have this multiplicative factor and boom, 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 just great things.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's at some point, and I'm not saying my job or the job of anyone that's been there for a while, because I'm very young in this community, and I'm very young in my PowerShell journey. I started very late in it, and in fact I rejected PowerShell initially. We can get into that story in a little bit if you want. I know your eyes got big. The point that I wanted to make was at some point, I think, everybody's the people that are good at it. If you've got great conveyance and you're able to enchant people with the audacity of the possible, of PowerShell, of orchestration, of problem solving, then you should make it your mission, if you can, if you're good at it, to try to get as many people to do that as well. We have, I'm not going to jump on the AI bandwagon where AI is going to replace everybody, but I will say that there's an incredibly attractive premise for businesses to not hire junior developers out the gate, because they'd rather empower their senior developers with AI. I've heard conversations about that for the last year or so, and I'm finally talking with students, and they're going, we can't get a job, not because we're terrible, we're actually top of our class, but people just aren't hiring junior developers because they can get an agentic AI, this or that. They can empower somebody, and it makes sense from both directions. It makes sense monetarily. It makes sense that the students want jobs. People need to eat. But I mean, the one thing that they're not going to have with AI, at least not yet, is that true contextual based problem solving capabilities, right? you can explain context to something, and it can do a pretty good job if you did a good job explaining the context. Absolutely, ChatGPT and Copilot are they're very cooperative sometimes. They're very excited sometimes about solving your problem. But if you garbage in, garbage out, if you describe it wrong, it's going to give you something incorrect. The only thing that you can hope to have are people that understand that context. And you won't have your senior developers around forever. They're going to want to retire at some point. So anybody here that maybe has the opportunity to hire a junior developer, take a chance. These guys want to work. These people are here to do good work. But yeah, go ahead.
We got to recommend the Phoenix Project. I mean, these people got to read this book. All right. It's a time-proven thing. You can't have a burn problem.
The Unicorn Project, was that the sequel?
Yeah, I think that one came after. Yeah.
Phoenix and Unicorn. They're both like tandem. One is the operations. The other, I think, is the infrastructure, the developer side or whatever. There's two of them that are at the same time. I would recommend definitely read Phoenix Project, Unicorn Project too. You could probably skip the DevOps Handbook because it's in the Phoenix Project enough, and it's more of a technical reference or a it's sort of like one of those like a Bible thumping sort of things where you're like, look, here's where it says it, and you can use that as sort of evidence. But if you have somebody that's a non-believer, Phoenix Project is definitely the way to go. I think the way that I've described that is the adoption is going to be hard for any, I would say pipeline, CI/CD, DevOps mentality. It's a top-down sort of culture change that needs to occur. That could be really hard. That could be super duper hard. And I forget exactly. I think it was Gartner that had the quote, but it's like, if you don't have a top-down approach or a top-down sort of edict about automation or any of that stuff, it'll still happen. It's just going to happen in pockets and silos. It's going to be disparate. It's not going to be consistent. And it ultimately isn't going to be as successful as it could have been if there would have been this consistent top-down, like thou shall, this is in your yearly goals. This is the direction we're going, get with it or get left. Like that's the way that I've seen it, and I believe it. I've seen that, and it's more than just at my enterprise or my organization. It's at a lot of organizations of people that I know.
Yeah, I hope that there are some people out there that are maybe earlier in their careers that Phoenix Project, what is this? Maybe they don't even know best practices or what they want to get with the kind of perspective that I and probably every single one of our guests have. Check out these books. They will just jumpstart you a major.
The audiobook is great too. The audiobook's real good. Yeah.
They invest some good effort into that one, I'll say as well.
Yeah. The guy's author's name is Greg Kim. Gene Kim, not Greg. Yeah. Gene Kim. And others. There's other people too, but it's mostly Gene Kim.
Yeah. I think it's like his brand. But Kevin Baer and George Spafford as well. Yeah. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. Great stuff. And I just personally, that type of thinking was so transformative to me because in my whole career, I was like, okay, I'm going to solve computer problem. But then apparently there's like this other angle to it where it's like the whole health of the IT system or the site, so to speak. And when you can start thinking of that, well, for me, it was felt more like a video game where I was more included in it. It wasn't just this bang, 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 work, never end. It was, whoa, there's this whole bigger picture, and PowerShell can tie into it and automate these things and be used as, which is what you told me earlier you use it a lot for, which is the glue or the duct tape of your organization.
Duct tape is, I think, again, glue and duct tape, it sounds less romanticized than maybe I mean it. It's the adhesion, right? It's adhesive between solutions that left to their own devices, they're really good. Maybe you've got platforms or processes or, things out there that already do X, Y, Z, they're already there. And you just need the workflow component to get them all together. I am absolutely certain that there are tools out there to do that. In fact, a long time ago, Admin Arsenal, a long time ago, for PDQ. I had PDQ inventory and PDQ deployed, and we orchestrated in deploy a series of steps and a series of things to effectively be an orchestrator. And it did a great job at it, but I would say it was acting like glue too. And right. So no matter how you get the solutions organized, right? It doesn't have to be PowerShell. If you're really good at learning and knowing and running,
Power Apps, maybe.
Or Power Apps. Yeah. If you whatever orchestration mentality or orchestration technology that you want to use just get it done. Just get it done. Understand that you're solving a problem. We use a lot of PowerShell because we're mostly a Windows shop, but even PowerShell, PWSH is cross-platform. And being able to have a consistent language, scripting language and orchestration language across all platforms is fairly remarkable. It's easy. I'm going to say it's easy in terms of you can always get help, right? And I say that very intentionally, right? You can always get help with PowerShell. And Stephen Judd and Sean Wheeler have an excellent get help sort of lab that they do. And, it just shows you that like, oh, it's getting the docs. It's learning. You're seeing examples. And it's very akin to like a man page or whatever for Linux. And if you're familiar with that side. So there's so many great reasons to go with PowerShell, but that's not the end all be all solution in a lot of what I do. Now, personally, of course, I write a lot of PowerShell to solve little problems around the house and little personal problems and little sort of like if I need to do like bulk renaming, I'm not going to do that in Java or something. I'm not going to do that. So it's going to be PowerShell, and it's likely I'm not even going to open VS Code. Like I'm probably just going to one-liner it, but I'm confident to the point where I can do that, and I still mess up, by the way. But I mean, the more you use it, the more you're going to be comfortable with it. And we use it for glue. We use it for tape. We use it for adhesion between all of these platforms. At work, there was this a big win with PowerShell specifically, because I think every now and then you ask questions about like, hey, what was some cool project you did at work or whatever. We were moving a data center, and we were using a platform that was really good at replicating data, block level data between sites. And we brought on a partner, paid some money, brought on a partner to sort of like scaffolds a solution and recommend and guide us in the way that we needed to go. And I thought they were just not doing it right. I fundamentally disagreed with the approach. And it's one of those things where it's like if somebody comes up into your house and you're just like, I would do it this way. I'd put my plates over here, and you're like, well, you don't live here. I like my plates over here. That's kind of what they were doing. And I knew enough about file system physics and data transfer science and how all that stuff works, just flow. I made a recommendation to do it my way instead of their way, and I did it my way. And it was supposed to be something like a 72-hour migration. We got it to like 18. A lot of that reduction was through automation and orchestration directly via PowerShell. We were calling the same platform that we were going to click through, but we were now using the API to do it. We were not overloading the replication engine by saying replicate 1.1 petabytes across the internet. No. Maybe just replicate 200 gigs at a time so that it actually finishes instead of this, massive long progress bar. It's just a bunch of little progress bars. All of that was managed via PowerShell and jobs and just thinking out the problem first and then going stagger. Let's go ahead and do it. That was the way we had a dashboard. I remember there was a dashboard that we built using what is it, like PSHTML or whatever. It was like it's an older module. It's a really older module, and it wasn't a particularly good looking dashboard, but it was something. And
if it's not customer facing, hey, if it works, it works, right?
No, it was all internal. Of course. I'm not I do help out with the PowerShellSummit.org site. It's all Hugo and Markdown, and so like we do that. But I mean, Copilot's a great friend to me with CSS related things because that's not my love language at all. So, but that was a project where we saved a lot of FT, a lot of hours, a lot of money, a lot of headache. It was one of those things where people didn't have to like come back days later to check progress. Like it was done in a day, in a long day. So it's more than just glue. Sometimes even if it is just adhesive, it's worth it.
Absolutely. I think you said though about, use whatever you like. If PowerShell is the thing for you, it works for us. I totally agree with that approach because there's going to be times when you need to apply this to some kind of thing that doesn't have an API that, you need to think proactively and take these important key lessons and approaches to problem solving and take them wherever the heck you go. I personally love PowerShell. I take it with me on Linux. I do like security CTFs using PowerShell because I'm just comfortable looping and accessing get child item and processing things like that. But I will totally call native commands. I'll even call Python a lot of times if I have some kind of script that's already written.
Fantastic call out there. Yeah, you don't have just the PowerShell toolkit. You literally have everything that the system has also.
Yep.
Even if you're using it inside of PowerShell. The one thing, so I agree with your statements. I disagree in a little bit though, because I do fundamentally believe while there may be many correct tools for a job, there's likely one that's going to perform better. And that performance is a holistic metric, right? Like it's your familiarity with the tool, the tool's actual technical capabilities, security, things like that. I rejected PowerShell during the very first opportunity that I should have been using it. I rejected it because I let familiarity and a lack of research kind of overpower me, take precedent, right? My very first job at working at the university as a systems administrator was because prior to 2011, 2012, I was nearly completely Linux. And I was in the Marine Corps for 8 years. They're Windows, but it's standard operating procedures, right? You have to follow sort of a procedure doc, SOP. So you don't really get to like go off on your own. I did in some cases, sort of through discovery, and we rewrote some things, but for mission critical things, you don't ad lib. You just follow the doc, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. So I was a Linux guy mostly, and a very Linux and Mac. I didn't really know a lot about Windows administration. So I come on to the university, they're very Linux focused. And oddly enough, Novell NetWare, like group-wise, old, I think it was NetWare 5.5, like the last NetWare distro before it was SUSE. But the very first thing that they had me do was migrate their directory, which was, I believe, eDirectory on like Red Hat something, and then Novell to Active Directory. Something that was, they didn't want to use the 2003 version, but I think 2008 had come out and 2012 had come out, or it was about to, and they were like, this is more stable, we can do this. It was the dark times. It was old. Anyway, I had never done that. So I had graduated college. I have a computer science degree. I have a master's degree. I have done .NET development. I was a .NET developer for a year. I know C#. So I look and I see, oh, there's the directory services namespace in C#. Cool. I'm going to write my sync operation, my nightly sync operation in C#. Because it can mess with Active Directory, and that's the right way to do it. I wrote, I think it was a 3,000 line solution using an Oracle DLL, using directory services and LDAP searcher. And it took so long to run. You could run it once a day, and it would take hours to parse through everything. It was, I don't even know the big O notation scientifically, like how slow this thing resolved. It was so bad, like 8 hours, and it would still be running, and it was normal. I don't know, maybe a year after that, because I remember a student worker at the time. I work with him now, but a student worker at the time was like, "You should try PowerShell." And I looked at, think it was like PowerShell 1. It was like on a 2008 server, and it was like PowerShell 1, maybe PowerShell 3. And I looked at it, and I was like, "This is immediately very foreign to me. I don't know how any of it works, and I can't afford to spend my time on some flash in the pan fad that's never going to be long lasting. Not going to waste my time on that." Instead, I wrote 3,000 lines of C#. About a year after that, I adopted PowerShell. I adopted the RSAT. At the time, it was the monolithic RSAT module. I reduced the 3,000 lines to probably about 800, and that was 800 lines of past me code. So it probably could be like 200 now. Even less with PSFramework. Another plug. And it ran, I was able to like offset some of the stuff, use, what's it called? Materialized views in Oracle. So I was able to like do a materialized view of the changes on the database side, something I didn't know about at the time because I didn't ask. We got it down, instead of 8 hours once a day, we got it running in like 2 minutes every 15 minutes just to keep constant sync. I didn't ask the right questions at the time. I totally went the wrong way. C# is a solution. It could do the work, but I mean, it wasn't the best solution, not by far. So I agree. Yes, there's the right tools for the job, but right tools is sort of a nebulous gradient. There's definitely a wrong way to do it, though.
That's fair.
I feel.
That's fair. That's fair. I think, if it works, it works ultimately.
it works.
Some
And
things
everyone
can
was
come
happy.
along with technical debt, right?
Yes.
I think technical debt, it's business choices, ultimately at the end of the day, pros and cons. I like making choices
Yes.
and choosing things like, hey, what's the problem we're trying to solve with PSFramework? Do you have a problem with logging, or do you have all your problems met? It's feeding in nicely. You can see all this automation across your org. If you don't, that would be a reason. Are there other solutions that could maybe get you where you need to go? Maybe. Are there other problems you're having with configuration? Are your scripts as flexible as they could be across your org? I don't know.
You are asking, this is the Socratic method, by the way. You're asking a bunch of simple yes or no or easy to answer questions. I would love for everyone to actually know the answers to those. I think that's the breakdown sometimes is you ask a question like, what do you want? And then they give you some people like whoever you're talking with. And it's not like they're bad or anything. I'm just saying that sometimes people don't know what they want. They know that what they see isn't necessarily what they want at the end, but they don't know what their like ultimate desire is in state, future state. They have to work through that themselves. Asking, like breaking down and asking questions like that, it helps more than just you. I think it helps people figure out like, what do I want? Where do I want this to be? How do I want this to in state to look like? It's again, to go back to the start of the show, reliability via planning, right? You're breaking down the requirements. There's also a lot to be said with like shifting left, like getting the blocker partners on board as fast as possible. Security, legal, any regulatory body that you deal with, management or administrative capacity there. Just getting people on so everybody's got their opinion laid out early on, and we can all shape the solution as partners instead of like fighting as adversaries at the end, right when we've got something that we think is great, but you're going to have a problem with. I think that's another thing, planning and shift left best as possible. Yeah.
Yep. And how did you know about the Socratic method? How do you know about that? Because I wish more people knew about it.
Because I try to do that. And sometimes I fail. Sometimes I ask questions and I get a little, I'm not going to say I get full of myself, but I'm like, so how do you do that? And then it's always up then and one more. And it comes across like it's like I'm having an internet argument, and it's not like that. I'm truly excited to get to the actual real root of the problem. I've seen so many times, and I mentioned problem recognition a lot. People look at symptoms as if they're problems. And if they asked questions and they broke things down just a little bit more and they applied appropriate and continuous critical thinking, then they would see that putting a Band-Aid on internal bleeding isn't going to fix your problem. You just are going to put it out of sight, out of mind. So it's sort of like the problem isn't the bruising. The problem is what's causing that. That's a symptom. That's a highlighter. So let's use that as a sensor and an indicator to drill down. Socratic method is a great way of going through. Now, I will say, I think they killed Socrates because he just kept asking questions, if I remember the story right.
Oh, boy.
So,
yikes.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that was it. Yeah, just maybe don't ask questions that much. But I mean,
history repeats itself. Okay.
They've outlawed stoning in this country, so let's just make sure to not leave.
Right.
check before you fly. I love asking questions in work. Really, I love problem solving. We talked at the beginning of the show at the top about what an SRE is. We're problem solvers, but so is like almost everyone in technology. You don't have to be an SRE to be a problem solver. SRE is just a one type of problem solver, and it's like an umbrella layer to it, right? The thing that I've seen, not just where I work now, but like previous places too, is that a lot of times developers, people that would be really good at writing code and solving sort of known quantity problems, fully requirements doc or in state sort of outlined problems, they are translating the desire to a product or a platform or some implementation of it. What I see sometimes is that the people that are really good at doing that also get saddled with the responsibility and jurisdiction of policy or governance or something that is associated but very different in terms of like makeup of terms in terms of sort of just implementation of it, right? So you're asked to deal with like long-term, I think about it in terms like, oh, I'm a backup admin. Cool. So I'm going to deal with, whatever scripts, whatever platforms, whatever technology is associated with backing up computer to, disaster recovery site. But then they also say, well, come up with an SLA, your retention policy. And you're like, well, I can map that relative to the platform or relative to the script that I'm using. And then they're like, cool, now go ahead and associate that in a technical document and an executive summary with business continuity so that it aligns with these 5 top KPIs. And you're like, hold on, brother. All I wanted to do was click a bunch of buttons and make the lights blink. And now you're asking me to write documentation and go to like this enterprise. No, this is too much. So again, by separating that out, it's really very helpful. Asking those questions, I think, helps define sort of the problem a little bit, and it sort of breaks the problem down into 2 separate places. Hopefully, at that point, you get enough like justification to like let policy people handle policy, governance people handle governance, and then like developers and like tech people handle the tech and development part.
As you say that, something comes to my mind, and I think it applies to life, but also work. And when it comes to thinking like high level, proactive, like what's really the best choice, critical thinking, both in life and in work, if you're in survival mode, good freaking luck. I think it might be unreasonable to think that you can add a ton of that. But if we're talking not real life stuff, but org stuff, if you have that situation where like it's survival, work's on fire all the way, you can use things like PowerShell to find some ways to like stop the fire hose so you can start to do it. But like, if it's a really challenging culture, it's not your job to fix it, but there might be some interesting opportunities to start having those conversations and asking those questions, because you're not going to get fired for asking a kind question if your goal is to help the business and increase reliability and all this stuff that drives productivity and profits at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think,
and you'll learn.
You mentioned a lot about, a lot of that is just like triage world. Like I'm stuck in triage world and everything's on fire and everything is bleeding, and I can't reduce or eliminate the toil, the repetitive tasks that have no enduring value in my work life, and you do it through automation or whatever, but I can't find the headspace, the room, the air to breathe to even get there because I am so bogged down. You mentioned the Phoenix project. There's the concept of a constraint, right? You've got the one guy or the 2 guys or the 3 people at your organization that are super good at their thing and other things, and everything funnels to them. And that's where like the choke point is, more or less. They are a constraint. There's no redundancy. There's no backup. There's just them. Whenever everything is on fire, you find those triage like constraints pretty quickly. I found PowerShell has. On my personal journey, PowerShell has been the thing that I call on almost exclusively whenever I was on like an infrastructure team, directly on an infrastructure team, and I was responsible for triage work and hemorrhage work and, hey, the business is down. Go ahead and do whatever you need to do. Document your changes, but like we'll file the changes after you fixed it. PowerShell was the thing that I used to organize this is quick problem solving, right? So it's not all right. It's just going in the right direction, but I'm going to misstep, right? And I wouldn't have been able to solve those problems with another language, if not just for familiarity. But I mean, the fact that you mentioned it earlier, PowerShell's got system access. And I mean, so does Python, so does Bash, so does Z Shell, like so does a lot of stuff, right? Ruby, can have it. And if you know those things, great. This is a PowerShell podcast. PowerShell is what I know the most and the best. So that's what I use, and it works really, really well. In fact, it's great whenever, we were talking about light bulb moments and teaching moments, like opening up Windows Terminal and just slapping out some code. And I don't use like commandlet compression. Like I don't use aliases very much. Like I usually just use tab completion, and I fully articulate it. And the thing about that is it's easy to read in terms of those are just words, but it's difficult to read in terms of that's a lot of words. That's a whole paragraph on one line. And I'm like, well, yeah, but the pipeline and the standard, like you see how it works, and they're just like, you're a wizard, Harry. Like they don't really. I think I lose them at some point. So I've got to rethink my approach to whenever I'm teaching someone from the terminal instead of from some like VS Code where you're kind of breaking it all down. Because it's really great whenever you know a language well enough and confidently enough to be able to code in front of someone. I know you've done it a couple times, and everybody I think that is on your PowerShell Wednesdays, they do it where they code live. They present, they share their screen, and that is I don't mind coding live. I don't mind like scripting live, writing script live, but I feel like I look down at this keyboard a lot more than I would look at like a camera if I was doing something live. So from a presentation standpoint, it feels weird to me, not making eye contact, sort of like walking in front of the projector, like don't do that, don't turn your back to the audience. They're here for you. You're here for them. So like, I realize I mistype things. It's like I can't spell all of a sudden when I do that. I'm not nervous. I'm there's competing priorities all of a sudden.
Oh, it's hard.
But I think people that are like super confident enough to do that are wild. It's very akin to like limb independence with somebody playing drums or singing and playing guitar at the same time. Like for me, I'm like, that's awesome. To maintain presentation mode, but also to be able to reliably like just look at the camera, type out a bunch of code, hit F5, and it just does it. That's remarkable to me.
And if you want to check it out live, PowerShell Wednesdays, every single Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern on youtube.com/@PDQ. You can join us on the PDQ Discord, discord.gg/PDQ PowerShell scripting channel. Matthew Gill, fantastic episode. Thank you so much for joining us, man. We'll have to do one of these maybe in person in April.
That'll be really great. I'd love to actually get on a bar session. That'd be really good.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Well, awesome. Right. Well, where can people find you, man, on social media? They want to tap in with you, maybe follow along with your journey?
I don't do socials very much, to be honest. I have a Facebook. I have a LinkedIn.
Your LinkedIn,
I think LinkedIn is like Matthew.Gill1 or something. If you go to PowerShellSummit.org and go to the organizers, I'm on there. And I'll
have links in the show notes as well.
I have a blog. I sometimes write on it. TheRealGill.com. TheRealGill.com. You can see some of the PowerShell stuff that I do. You can see some of the Summit stuff I do. You can see some of the cooking stuff I do. So.
Ooh, awesome. Well, thank you very much. And everybody out there, take care. Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. And we will see you next time. Keep learning. Keep growing. That's the power of PowerShell.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.